my head is kind of cut off. My body is shaking, and I don't really know what I'm going to be speaking to you about anymore, but Ralph Waldo Emerson says that only to the degree that we are unsettled is there any hope for us. So maybe there's a little bit of hope for me still. So before I forget, and if I never land this point, and Umani invited us all to be a holy mess. I am a holy mess. So if I don't remember what this talk is about, it's about the importance of darkness and crisis and difficulty in the spiritual process. We hear a lot about enlightenment here at this conference, and I don't know very much about enlightenment at all. What I know of the divine has more to do with heartbreak and yearning and sometimes confusion. But I would like to speak about endarkenment and the power of that and the teachings that we can learn from darkness in the form of the dark feminine that we can find in all of the world's great wisdom lineages. I wanted to start the way Alan Watts always started his talks on Kali. And he started with a story that said that an astronaut went up all the way far, far into space to meet God, and he comes back, and everyone says, "Alors, so?" And he says, "She's black." And referring supposedly to the darkness of space, the womb-like darkness of space, which is evidently feminine. And actually, darkness and the feminine have a really deep relationship. I mean, we think of feminine as maybe light and loving, and it is. But the full feminine is the dark feminine. It has this receptive quality of darkness, right? Which takes everything in, which holds everything in space. And I believe in our psychological lives, in our spiritual lives, the womb is dark. And we're conceived in this darkness, in this protective, holy space of the womb. And the yoni, it's dark. And the ways in which we make love include all these dark, messy, mushy places. You know, we have to go into the darkness to become intimate with each other. And the earth is also dark, right? And in order for anything to grow, it has to be planted into darkness. And the seed which is planted into darkness has to kind of turn inside out, fall completely apart. It's not a lovely process. It's a messy fucking process. And if you don't know what's going to happen, you're probably going to be certain that the seed has just perished, right? Because it fell apart and God destroyed. But really, it is only being planted so that the transfiguration can happen and life could grow. And so this feminine quality of darkness, which we see in the world's great lineages, seems to be this kind of initiatory power into the spiritual life. It's the quality that initiates and transfigures the soul. So I wanted to start actually with a story from the Buddhist tradition. And incredibly, the Buddha, after having gone through all of the initiatic processes that it takes to become enlightened, is on the brink of awakening and then encounters his dark night of the soul. So he has now achieved enlightenment and has now to take his seat of awakening under the Bodhi tree. And then the demon Mara, this great demon, appears And I mean, we can speak about demons, or we can speak about the unintegrated parts of ourselves, right? So this demon Mara appears, and he first tries to seduce Buddha with his like sexy daughters. The Buddha says thanks, but no thanks. And then a great army of demons he reproduces. He can reproduce. He produces a great army of demons. And he says, Buddha, you are not the first to be awakened. I have done all the spiritual practices. I will take the seat under the Bodhi tree. And I have an entire army to affirm my awakening. And in the Buddhist tradition, it is very important that someone affirms our awakening. And so the entire army of demons roar, yes, Mara, we affirm your awakening. And Mara says, and you, Buddha, who do you have to speak for you? And Buddha looks around, and evidently there's no one to speak for him, because there's only him. And so he reaches down and he touches the earth. The dark earth, and the earth herself roars, I bear witness to your awakening. And with that statement, the army of demons disappears, and the Buddha takes his seat under the Bodhi tree. And I love that so much, because what we have here is this kind of teaching about not only, we're so obsessed with transcendence, right? But this teaching is not only about the importance of the journey up towards the transcendent, but also the journey down into like the mud, the mush, the earth, embodiment, right? It's about embodying the insights that we have received in our awakening journey, and I really love that. And so the dark night of the soul it's called the dark night of the soul in the Christian tradition, but it is a universal concept which speaks about the importance of spiritual maturation, which cannot happen without crisis, which cannot happen without difficulty. And in the Jewish tradition, there is this really interesting story. So first of all, Jews go into the desert, which is also a kind of a holding place. And in the desert, they encounter the divine. But how does the divine appear to them? The divine sort of leads the Jewish people during the nighttime covered in a pillar of fire, and in the daytime in a cloud, in a dark cloud. And in order to communicate with the divine, what one must do is enter the dark cloud where the intimacy with the divine can unfold. And so there's the story of Moses first encountering the dark cloud. It was approaching the people, and everyone moved back. And Moses was the only one who was able to move into it. And that's part of what signified or was a sign of his spiritual leadership. So there's this very cool moment in the Torah where the Jews just worshipped the golden calf, and Moses was very angry, and he smashed the tablets of the Ten Commandments, and there's you can think of that as like the great separation happened. He goes back up to God, and he was like, listen, God, I have done everything you have told me to do, and yet I don't even know what it is, and the people are not listening to me. I want to know you. I want to know you. I want to know what I'm speaking about. There was this beautiful sense of longing for connection and intimacy with God after this really difficult experience that he just lived through. And a really cool thing happens. God answers Moses, because God is always in the cloud, and Moses says, I want to know your true face. And God says, okay, but you cannot see me and live. So he puts Moses into a cleft in the rock, so like a cave. And then in the Torah it says, God covers Moses with her hand. And so Moses goes into like a holding environment, like a dark place. And then God, the closest God can get to Moses, passes before this dark place. And Moses is allowed to peek through God's fingers and see God's backside, like God's to us, And it's beautiful because on one hand, God is saying, you can't see me all at once. You can't behold my glory, my light, because there's something else that needs to happen. Your ego will be annihilated, and there's this way in which God doesn't want that to happen all at once. God is protecting the individuality of Moses, and God is giving a kind of a model for the dark night. You want to know me? You want to know what the divine is? You have to go into a cave. You have to go into the dark. And we see this kind of similar story in the Kabbalistic tradition. So in the Kabbalistic tradition, it is said that God creates the world twice. Because the first time that God creates the world, God is so excited that God pours all of her light, all of God's light into the world, and the vessels that God creates to hold this light can't tolerate it and shatter. And so the first world shatters. And then something amazing happens, and God goes into the dark night of the soul. And what literally is spoken about in the Kabbalistic literature is that the process of tzimtzum, or withdrawal, happens. God withdraws God's self from God's center and creates this kind of a womb environment, this holy darkness, this space in which then God creates the second world, the second creation, in which darkness plays a much more important role. And and that aspect, so this is the interesting part, is that what remains then in the world is said to be the divine feminine. So God, in God's transcendence, withdraws away, but there is an aspect of the divine, the feminine aspect that we call the Shekhinah, which literally means the indwelling in the Jewish tradition, and that aspect of God remains. That aspect of God is said to have chosen to remain in exile with her children. I love that, and I feel separation like all the time. And a lot of like yearning for something more than that, but what helps me so often is to remember that. To remember that anywhere I feel separate, anywhere I feel in exile, that God is necessarily there. That's the function of the divine feminine. That she doesn't abandon her children. She doesn't turn away. She has no orphans. The divine feminine has no orphans. So I really love that, that story. And I'm sorry that I'm all over the place. I'm going to see. So, I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm not a scientist. I'm trembling in my knees. But I am a scholar of comparative religion, and something really cool happened last year. I kind of wrote an article that I thought 5 people would read, and it went globally viral, and kind of put me in a position to have to do this. Now, I want to do this, and Zaya and Maurizio were insane enough to invite me to do this, but I want to tell you what I think, why I think this happened, and okay, ready? This is what happened in 2015. This is not a simulation, this is not a digital recreation. This is Kali on the top of the Empire State Building. Right, me too. I was like, what the hell? And I was so astonished by this image, I had to know what this was. This was an image by Android Jones, an artist, and this was projected onto the Empire State Building as part of a documentary promotion of a film called Racing Extinction that was for National Geographic, which spoke about the extinction of species. We are now living in the 6th extinction of species, according to every scientist, climate scientist on the planet. And every 20 minutes, apparently, a species goes extinct on this planet. So I saw this on the top of the Empire State Building, and I wrote a little article, and I said, Kali takes New York! And I thought that was so cool. No, Kali Takes Manhattan. I don't remember. It was cool. And I was so excited. Oh my God, Kali in New York. And I was beginning to feel this kind of emergence of an archetype, right? Emergence of an archetype into the collective culture. And, well, only a year later, something amazing happened in the world and in our country. Donald Trump won the presidency of the United States. And I saw this on the top of the Empire State Building. And every part of my body, every part of my being knew that was exactly the same image. Kali is not Donald Trump, but what happened there shook up our society. It kind of like shattered the illusions of like a happy-go-lucky, lovely American society. We saw who we were, and that's the quality of Kali. That's her function. It is to strip us of illusion. She disillusions us, right? It's about the disappointment that we feel. The disappointment that we feel with our misconceptions and with the little lies we tell ourselves. And so I wrote an article called Kali Takes America, which kind of took America. And now I feel like this is a stretch, but this is what I feel, and please forgive me if this is not appropriate. But on the plane here, I bought the New York Magazine, and this was on the cover of the New York Magazine, the Doomed Earth catalog. I have it right here, but I took a picture of it for you. And in the middle of it, you have this. And you know, I saw that picture, and for me, it was another Kali on the top, on the head of the Empire State Building, except that now I feel like Kali takes the world. And this isn't a kind of an alarmist thing. That's not at all why I want to bring it up. I want to say that this is like the iconography of Kali. What this does to us is what Kali does when we venerate her. She shocks us. She makes us no longer able to follow the small story about our world and everything being okay and our small lives and our small hopes. There's this kind of a shattering that happens, and I really felt that, and I want to read you just a few of the topics, like the little main points in this article. Heat death, the end of food, climate plagues, unbreathable air, perpetual war, permanent economic collapse. I feel the discomfort in the room. I know this isn't cool, but just feel it. Poisoned oceans. I could go on, but I think that's good, that's enough. Lots of people criticize this article, and it's not about this article. It's just about what that does to us, how it shakes us up enough to see through the illusion of everything is fine. It's like Kali strips us of the false self. And in the global, we're kind of going through this global initiation. We're going through a global initiation, and this kind of like false self addicted to capitalist crap. And, we have come to the limits of it. We are coming to the limits of it, and it's a very painful place. And it's a very confusing place. And it's a place we're really faced with the unknown. I mean, in all traditional societies, there were 5 minutes? In all traditional societies, there were the initiatory processes where like a young person was like thrown into the dark pit. And in that pit, usually in the middle of the night, so they didn't know what was happening to them, and in that pit, something had to happen, right? The person had to find the inner resources to become a mature member of their society. And that's part what I see happening to us, that we're kind of collectively being thrown into this dark pit, into the unknown, where we must mature, we must mature or perish. And so let's see, this is Chamunda, a really fierce form of Kali who conquers demons Chanda and Munda. And I just thought this was so, like for me, these two images really overlaid one another, and I just felt that so deeply. And you see, she comes and she bears weapons because she's fierce, because truth is fierce, right? Because truth is uncomfortable. She has this, she's holding up the veil between the worlds, and she's drinking the blood of demons and carrying all these weapons. And it's like, yeah, you have to be annihilated. We have to be annihilated. We want to enter the spiritual life. We have to get stripped down to our bones, right? Look at her. We have to be stripped down to our bones. We have to kind of allow life, allow reality to kill off the false self. Right? I don't know very much about that. I'm trying to shine brighter than I am, but I know the function of it. And the function of it is radical stripping and burning, to burn up the old stories, to burn up the false self, right? To get real, to get real. There's this beautiful quote from Rilke that she reminds me of. She says, "Death is really your best friend, because death is the true yea-sayer. She stands on the verge of, because life says yes and no, and death stands on the verge of the abyss and says only yes." And that aspect of Kali, that aspect of the dark feminine that says, yes, yes, take me, yes, break me open, break open my heart, use me, use my body, feeding the world with whatever we've got. That's the core for me of the dark feminine, that aspect of surrender without which the spiritual life is incomplete. And this is what Kali really looks like. So Kali is really cool, and I'm going to try very quickly to just give you the core of the myths of Kali. So first of all, the first time we see the dark feminine appearing in the Puranas, it's like the first emanation of Shakti. So Shiva is the divine masculine in the Hindu tradition, and Shakti is the divine feminine. And she incarnates for the first time as Sati. And Sati and Shiva love each other and have this perfect love, and they make love and the worlds arise. And then this interesting thing happens where Shiva, because he's like, the lord of the death, and he has dreadlocks, and he hangs out in cemeteries and is really horrifying. Sati's father doesn't invite Shiva to like a very important sacrifice, and that dishonors the feminine. And Sati is this beautiful goddess. And so Sati wants to go and speak to her father, but Shiva blocks her way and says, "Where are you going? We weren't invited to the sacrifice. We're not going to go anywhere." And Sati was like, no. You do not stand in my way. And suddenly, Sati turns into this terrifying dark goddess. And Shiva, who's her husband, becomes terrified. The Lord of Death becomes terrified of Sati, of this dark emanation of her. And he covers his face. And he says, "Well, who are you and what have you done to my beloved Sati?" And Sati says, "Shiva, don't you recognize me? I am Sati, and this is my true form." Meaning that she only takes this form of beauty to please Shiva, but that at her core, in her heart, she is dark. And then the core of Kali's myth happens on a battleground. And what's happening is that the gods are fighting for the survival of the world, right? Because their world is threatened, kind of much like our world is threatened right now with extinction. And the gods, in their fabulous, unwise wisdom, gave a special power to one of the demons, where with every drop of his blood, 1,000 more demons can spring up. And he cannot be conquered by any man or god. And so, the only choice that they have got is the goddess. And Durga, this powerful, beautiful goddess in red, rides in on her lion, on her pussy, right, onto the battleground, and she's fierce, and she has all the weapons of war, and she's cutting off heads. But she sees that that's not enough, because every time it appears that she's winning, more demons are arising. And so it appears that the world will be lost. And then suddenly, from within Durga's third eye, rises this deeper aspect of her, Kali, in all of her fierceness, and she's dark. and she's angry, and she's bloody, and she's hungry, and she's ugly. She's all of these things women and angry and women and gods are not supposed to be, right? And she begins to lick up the blood of these demons before it can hit the ground, and she slays them, and finally she saves the world. Right? And everyone is beginning to rejoice. The world has been saved. But Kali in her grace and her rage and her Shakti and her power, she begins to dance. She begins to dance this great dance of destruction. And suddenly, it's no longer demons that are threatening the world. It is Kali in her dance that's shaking up the whole universe. The whole universe is wobbling, is trembling, and the gods are terrified again. And they don't know what to do, so they go, Shiva, go do something about your crazy wife. And Shiva is like, okay. So the story goes, go do something about your psycho wife, right? So Shiva, I don't know what to do, so Shiva lays down underneath Kali because there's no containing Kali, and he starts crying out, Ma, Ma. And so the story goes, Kali remembers that she's the mother of creation and stops. But I think that there might be another interpretation of this. Because of course, in the patriarchal culture of India, the only thing that would be reasonable is for the man to go calm his wife. And that's such a beautiful way in which we, right? Such an awesome way in which, like, this is what the women are, oh my God, oh no, right? But we are terrified of the feminine. We are terrified of the rage and the pain and the sorrow and the beauty and the power of the feminine. We will do anything to make it stop, anything to make it stop. And if the world is shaking, it's her fault and we need to make it stop. I think you see, Kali knew exactly when to stop. I think that the world, the way it was, had to tremble, had to shatter, so that the new world can be recreated from her heart, a new world where those kinds of demons could no longer conquer it. And so I think that part of what's happening right now is that our world is being shaken up. And when our world gets shaken up in our spiritual lives, and I think all of us here know what I mean, when we are called to enter the darkness, where Meister Eckhart says the ground of the soul is dark, right? In that darkness, which is painful and destroying of everything we knew and all of our ideas and all of our certainties, that's where we can be intimate with God. That's what matures the soul, initiates the soul into intimacy, further intimacy with the divine, and then really allows for that intimacy, right? Like the lovers meet in darkness, to unfold. And so, I know that I have no time. I'll just go through slides so you can feel some of the other aspects of the dark feminine through the world's tradition. This is Tara, the great bodhisattva of compassion. She's always ready. Her foot is off the lotus. She's always ready to get off her seat of awakening and go assist all suffering beings. She is the blue Tara, and in her wrathful aspect, she's a Kajati, and she's terrifying, right? There's the wrathful and the benevolent aspect of every deity in the Buddhist tradition. And this is the Black Madonna. And I know someone here spoke about the Black Madonna, and so it's okay that I don't have so much time to speak about her. But can I have a few more minutes? So I encountered the Black Madonna when I was a very little girl. I'm Jewish. I come from a very secular family. My beautiful mother, who's 80, going to turn 80 tomorrow, is in the audience with my sister. But the first time I heard the word God, I was like, oh, it's mine. I need it. And in the communist society where I grew up in Soviet Union, that wasn't really a thing. But I went to a Polish school where there were nuns and priests that would come in secret and teach Catholic kids communion. And I was like, please teach me. And someone gave me an icon of the Black Madonna. And in the time when the communist world began to fall apart and there was mass chaos and people were digging through garbage dumps and it was very difficult to know what was coming, I felt so overwhelmed. And I felt like my parents couldn't understand me because, adult life and the reality of that. The kids of my age at the time, I felt I couldn't relate to. But I would hold her, I would have her, and I would look at her, and I would feel like she knows. She knows. You see, she has scars here. This is Matka Boska Częstochowska, the Our Lady Częstochowa. And she's one of hundreds of black Madonnas. Many of them are in Spain. We have many in Italy. This one I want to speak about just because she's so dear to my heart. And the legend goes, as most legends of the Black Madonna go, is that she was painted on a table that was made by Christ, by Luke the evangelist. And that at some point she was stolen and some robbers or Hittite raiders slashed her. And what's interesting is that the scars remain, and to me they're actually the core of this Black Madonna. You see, we have Christ on her lap, but her scars kind of foreshadow the wounds of crucifixion. So it's almost like she has the baby Christ in her lap, but also the crucified Christ in her lap. When Christ is resurrected, there's this cool moment where he meets Thomas on the way, on a path, and Thomas says, "Master, how do I know that it's really you?" And something really interesting happens. Christ, this is how Thomas, by the way, got the name Doubting Thomas, because he doubted that was Christ. And Christ says, "Okay, put your fingers into my wounds. Put your fingers into my wounds and you will know me." And so this kind of has the same qualities. We don't have to turn away from pain and suffering in this world. She's a broken-hearted mother, a tender-hearted mother. And part of what brings us into intimacy, I think, with reality, with ourselves, with God, is our capacity to feel it all, the ecstasy and agony of life, to feel the wounds of creation, to respond to them, and to hold it all, And I want to end with a poem that is really, really appropriate for this talk. You can close your eyes. Some of you I will hollow out. I will make you a cave. I will carve you so deep the stars will shine in your darkness. You will be a bowl. You will be a cup in the rock collecting rain. I will hollow you with knives. I will not do this to make you clean. I will not do this to make you pure. You are clean already. You are pure already. I will do this because the world needs the hollowness of you. I will do this for the space that you will be. I will do this because you must be large, a passage. People will find their way through you, a bowl. People will eat from you, and their hunger will not weaken them to death. A cup to catch the sacred rain. My daughter, my son, do not cry. Do not be afraid. Nothing you need will be lost. I am shaping you. I am making you ready. Light will flow in your hollowing. You will be filled with light. Your bones will shine. The round, open center of you will be radiant. I will call you brilliant one. I will call you daughter, son, who is wide. I will call you transformed. This is from Mother Wisdom Speaks by Christine Lore Weber, and thank you all so much. you.